Take 121. Just kidding. Take 2. Hi, my name's Erin Moog, and I can't believe that I am trying this attempt at putting some content up on YouTube so I can connect with others. I keep burping. Like, that alone just proves that I am no actor. This is not going to be my jam. But the reason I'm here is because in May 2022, came down with what the world horribly calls long haul COVID. And I say horribly calls because when you hear that, you think that it's a continuation of COVID symptoms. Everything I experienced was nothing like what it was like when I had COVID. It was what COVID triggered in my body, which was a full-on alien attack of every system in my body except for probably my respiratory system. I didn't deal with any kind of shortness of breath or tightness in the chest, but I would say every other type of tissue in my body was destroyed from head to toe. Serious brain damage. There were times that I was starting to lose my sight. There were times I was starting to lose my hearing. The vertigo was unrelenting. Neurological pins and needles, electrical shocks, zaps in my head, my nose, my teeth. I know it might be TMI, but my vagina, my intestines, it felt like wooden stakes had been nailed into my elbows, my hips, my knees, my muscles, my tendons. It felt like they were shredded. I wasn't able to walk. There were times where I couldn't feel my legs at all, where I'd have to sit on the couch and prop my legs up on my dad's lap, and he would just massage my calves, trying to pump blood into them as I would cry. And this doesn't even do it justice. I was being destroyed. And this went on for 7 months, nonstop, unrelenting. It was the darkest time in my life. Many nights were spent crying and screaming that this existence is not any life that I wanted, nor could I hold. The number 988 became my friend and my lifeline, and I hold no judgments or taboo way of thinking around how horrible the idea of suicide is, when for me at my core it was so real. After about 7 months of this, the roller coaster ended. Well, it started to slow down, but it had to hit its peak when, after a couple weeks solid, I was experiencing a rapid heart rate of around like 160 to 170 on a regular basis. And I was also and still experiencing horrific neurological symptoms, unable to feel my arms and legs, body parts going numb. It was so scary. At this point, my dad and I had been carting me around from emergency room to emergency room, from doctor to doctor, and we both didn't know what warranted a trip to the emergency room anymore, because really nobody was giving me any answers. Nobody was making me feel any better, and it just seemed like a lost cause. So after a couple weeks of these chunks of time where I'd go like 45 minutes to sometimes like 4 hours of my heart pounding out of my chest, I finally decided to put my Fitbit watch on my wrist to see what my heart rate was. And this was during the day. It was probably like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it said 165. And so I decided to do the Dr. Google and ask what is a heart rate that warrants a trip to the emergency room. And I can't really remember. I think maybe it's at 130 and above, or maybe 160 and above. And so my dad was upstairs in the loft where his bedroom is and his office, and I just said up to him, "Hey Dad, it's happening again. It's saying that this is a heart rate that warrants going into the emergency room." And he said, "I think we should go." And I just started panicking. One more doctor, one more set of needles, and I had so much trauma. I kept saying, "Please don't make me go. I don't want to go." And he encouraged me to go because it was either then, which was during the day, or it was going to end up being 2 in the morning, because that had started to become our pattern, that I would go to sleep in my bedroom. It would wake me up. I would get very scared. I felt like I was going to have a stroke, a heart attack. And I would go upstairs to my dad's bed, ask him to hold me, as blood just coursed up the base of my skull. Veins protruded near my temple. And it was like the worst tension headache you can ever imagine, with just blood just trying to flow where the heart was just inefficiently doing it. And my body was numb. I still had all these horrible neurological symptoms, and it felt like my body was on fire. And I just kept repeating, "I'm so hot, I'm so hot, I'm so hot." And my dad just kept trying to calm me down. "Stay calm, keep breathing, I'll go get you some water. Erin, you don't feel hot, you feel cold." So while I felt like an inferno, my skin was super cold and clammy. So that had been going on for about 2.5 weeks. And during that day, my dad took me to the nearby hospital, which was pretty small. And they jumped to it right away. They obviously thought it was important enough to just expedite me right to the front of the line. I burped again. And they saw it as something that was very dangerous, and they said, "You should be here, and you should have come in a long time ago for this." They put me on a beta blocker. My heart rate slowed down pretty much immediately, and they said that they wanted to take me by ambulance to a larger hospital where they had a better cardiac team to monitor me. By this time it was late, it was dark, December, near Christmas 2022. Again, my body had just been through so much. It was physical trauma after physical trauma after physical trauma, and it couldn't take what was happening over and over and over again. And even the thought of being put in an ambulance was traumatizing to me. So off I went, scared, shaking, and talking to the male nurse in the ambulance just to try and keep me calm. He was super sweet, and he kept talking about all the things that he had seen with long COVID, or not long COVID, but COVID, because he had seen quite a few deaths in the hospital. And he just kept talking about how he couldn't believe how so many people weren't taking it seriously, and especially since after he had seen so much. Because of the beta blocker, my heart rate was dropping, or my blood pressure was dropping substantially, and he was nervous about it. So yeah, you can have them. the nurse was really worried about the fact that my blood pressure was dropping so quickly. I need you to keep your eyes open, Erin. I'll try, but I'm really tired. I know you're tired, but your blood pressure is extremely low, and I don't want you to pass out. So I did. I did the best I could. I didn't fall asleep, and he got me to the hospital. I was in there for a week, and it was a nightmare. But when I left, at that time, I finally succumbed to Western medicine and took all the pharmaceutical prescription medications that they prescribed. So I left with gabapentin for my nerve pain. I'll butcher this name, Metropolo, for a beta blocker to slow down my heart, and an antibiotic because they found a strep infection in my blood to boot while I was there. And so what was this crazy, crazy, non-stop fucking horror ride for 7 months finally started to slow down a little bit once I got on those medications and got back home. And when I say slow down, that is a relative term because I still had a ton of issues. And I like to joke that COVID ripped off all of my limbs and plucked out both of my eyeballs. And then when I got back from the hospital and relatively started feeling a little bit better, I put in an arm, I put in a leg, I plopped one eyeball back in and said, I'm ready to go. I am ready to live again. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. And so I was doing better. By the summertime, I was hiking a little, I was swimming. I still had weird numbing sensations, but they were nowhere near as debilitating. I could function. I didn't mind being in my body. Whereas before, living in my body was living in a burning house. And yeah, things were better. And after you experience something like that, you just want to get on with life. And on some level, I was running away from the traumatic experience, and I wanted to get as far away from it as possible. So I moved out to Colorado, and I had lived there previously for about 13 years. Went back to work for a principal that I adored, and with a population of kids that I really liked, elementary students, a lot of Spanish-speaking kids, where I could speak my Spanish and practice, and I had a lot of friends out there. And for years before I got sick, I kept saying I want to move back out to Colorado. And I learned very quickly from this experience that life can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye. And while I'm here, I should try and do something that I enjoy. Intuitively, I knew that jumping back into the public school setting was a dicey thing to do. Lots of germs, a very energetically masculine driven environment where it's not a lot of taking your time. It's not a lot of nurturing, of creativity and slowing down. It's you've got 20 minutes to cram this in, you've got 20 minutes to cram this in, go, 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 go. And everyone had COVID and the flu all within the first couple weeks when I was there. I wore a mask. I was the first one and only one to wear a mask when I started the first day. And then within the next couple weeks, almost everyone was wearing a mask again because everyone everyone was sick. Kids were dropping like flies. They were all at home. Teachers were sick. And little kids in my group would be coughing and snot running down their nose and talking about how their sister at home had COVID and they probably had COVID, but yet here they were. And I didn't last for very long. About a month and a half before my immune system just completely collapsed. There were 2 incidences where staff members had to drive me to the emergency room because, again, my heart was at 160, 165, and it wouldn't drop even with the use of beta blockers. And so here I was again in the hospital, probably exposed to different viruses this time. And I didn't make it. And a lot of people don't even know that I've been back in Michigan since late October. It gets really hard to become the person who everybody asks you about your health. Being asked about my health is just about being asked, hey, how was your time fighting in the Vietnam War? It may not have been an actual external war, but it was a biological war that was occurring inside of my body. And it gets hard to talk about. And I think that's the reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel, because there's multiple reasons. I've been in the process of writing a book, and that book is called Left Behind by Life, but Not by God. One woman's dark journey through long COVID and the spiritual lessons learned. That's one thing, is eventually I'd like to get that book out there. And it's amazing to me how I can tell people what I've been experiencing, and nobody can really relate. But yet when I'm on a Facebook page or YouTube within these groups, there's so many of us that our lives have just been completely destroyed and flipped upside down. And a lot of them are like me, big time runners, prior marathon runners, super healthy, active weightlifters, and the next thing they know, we can hardly walk a block in our neighborhood. So there's that. And I'm not sure if you've heard of the book When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate, but it's a little different. I think that has a lot to do with trauma, but this has to do with trauma for me in some part too. But my mind wants to say I can go back. I burped again. That I can go back to the old me. I can do the old job. I can do the old profession like I used to. And I can just navigate around the things that are difficult or might potentially compromise my health. But my body, it won't let me. It is just screaming, you can't teach anymore. Not in a public school setting, not in the fashion in which a public school is ran. There's just no way. Even if my mind wants to will it into existence, my body is not going to let me right now. And I've been on disability insurance pretty much this whole time. But I fear it's coming close to an end, and it's scary. There's this story that my friend and spiritual author Alan Cohen talks about, and he calls it Pete the Duck. And it's from a time when Alan lived on an organic farm, and Pete, who was lovingly named this by the community, would waddle around between the bunkhouse and the main house, and it would quack at the people that would walk by. And Alan would sit on the bench and watch people go past this duck. The first woman was a little overweight, and she would walk past the duck and say, "Quack, quack, quack, Pete. Always looking for food. Can't you just stay on your diet?" And then the second man, or woman, was a professional singer, and she would walk past the duck and say, "Oh, Pete, thank you so much for that beautiful morning song." And then the third person who walked by was a very analytical, intelligent man who was the architect of the farm. And he would say, "Quack, quack, quack, Pete. All these questions, but never any answers." And whether this is true or not, or if it was just a parable that Alan liked to share with people to teach the lesson that what is our internal world becomes what our outer world is. The overweight woman, she had a very self-critical, judgmental inner world. Therefore, the outer world was also that way. The architect had a very frustrating, angsty inner world, and therefore the outer world of Pete the Duck had his frustration. And then the woman who was the singer had a very beautiful, magical internal world, and that was reflected on her outer world. So when I hear that story, I think of, how does it apply to me? How do I do that? Because I've had an inner world that says, there's this box that, does that look like a box? That I can only be financially compensated in. And that would be in a very hard-working, stressful, masculine-driven environment. And I can't do that anymore. So where do those inner thoughts need to change so I can have a different outward reality? Another inner thought that I have to wrestle with is, I don't deserve help. I do deserve help. And this has been the hardest part of this journey, is asking for help. It's been very triggering for me. And unless you came from a young place where you didn't get a lot of emotional needs met, you may not understand the level of fight or flight one goes into when they ask for help in preparation for rejection. So that's another thing I'm dealing with. I've got some ideas, but I'm going to need help with them moving forward. The production of this book. I've also thought about utilizing my watercolors to make a deck of cards called Safe Brain, Healthy Body, where it's got my watercolor on one side, and then on the other side it's got a strategy to calm the autonomic nervous system so you can live in the present moment. I've been talking to a friend, a Tico, a Costa Rican friend, who's asked me if I potentially want to run some retreats with him in Costa Rica. And then I've also thought about getting certified in the somatic experience and becoming more of a therapist to help people heal from trauma. And not in a talk therapy way, but in a internal, physical way. where you're healing what's happening in the body so you can actually be in the present moment. This is a long video for a first one, but this is it. And I don't know if I mentioned my friend Nathan Winkelpleck at the beginning, but he's who I spoke to today, and he has created quite a following in his niche area, which is dividend growth investing. And I had spoken to him a couple years ago because I had taken all the investment exams thinking that I was going to be doing a big career shift, and it never happened because God likes to laugh at my plans. But I wanted his advice on how to make professional YouTube videos. And so he sent me a couple links to look at, and one of these men had talked about how, one, there's the spotlight effect. Basically, you think the world revolves around you, but no one truly gives a shit, so you might as well just put it out there, because even if they have an opinion that's fleeting, once it's gone, they're on with their life, and you are now an afterthought. Two, I guess it takes like 150 videos to really gain some kind of momentum and create a community. And I went back and looked at the very first videos of the people that I really like, and this is spot on. They're so bad. And now 3 years in, they've got a nice little following. They've been supported a little bit monetarily through their efforts on YouTube and have created a nice little community. So that's two. And yeah, we'll see where this goes. I'm not very techie. I need a lot of help with this. And I'm just staying real close to God on this one and trying to stay in the present moment, because one thing this thing has taught me is grasping for a better future me is a complete falsehood. There's no such thing as the better future me. And lastly, the only thing I'm ever going to have if everything is taken away from me is me, my soul, my source from which I was born and from which I will return one day. That's my one constant, and it'll never leave me. All the rest of the things I can grasp for and lose in the blink of an eye. And that's really what the core of my book is, that I'm hoping to finish up, is that everything can leave you, but your real true security is within yourself and within whatever you call the God of your understanding. So let's see how this goes, shall we?